All right.
All right. Well, good day to everyone. Welcome back to the next chapter in the virtual chat series of Keep Learning Strong. This is something that we've come up with to connect professionals within the learning and development and industry, and hopefully to help promote learning as well as those professionals that make it happen. With that in mind, we'll share with you some of the ways in which you can engage with us and join the movement around Keep Learning Strong through LinkedIn at Enovation Solutions, hashtag Keep Learning Strong, through Twitter at Enovation Solutions, hashtag Keep Learning Strong, or via our website at innovationsolutions.com/Keep Learning Strong. And we invite those of you that tune in today, whether you're returning visitors or first-time visitors, to engage with us and follow us on those social media outlets. And hopefully we'll have a chance days and weeks ahead of us as well. And by way of introductions, if you don't know us already, my name is Roger Rinker. I spent close to 35 years in the corporate HR and learning and development space for a couple of large global organizations. My partner is Candace McGlynn, who has not quite as many years as I do, but still an impressive number. Candace, would you like to say a few things about your background?
Yep. So I'll let you do the math. I have combined with Roger about 45 years of experience in learning and development, but I'm just happy to be here, and talent development is a passion of mine, and Keep Learning Strong chat series has been a really good time of just learning and getting insights from thought leaders.
Great. Thank you, Candace. And Candace will return in just a little while when after I wear out Annemarie here as our guest. I will pass it back to Candace to take over. But having said that, we're very, very happy and fortunate, I believe, to have with us today Annemarie McAuley. Annemarie is a global training and development director for Indeed.com. And we're going to allow her to give a brief introduction of herself at this point and tell the audience a little bit about you and your organization, Annemarie.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you both for inviting me to the forum today. And I commend you both on this series of Keeping Learning Strong. I think it's a wonderful initiative. I'm probably close enough to yourself, Roger, in that I have 20 plus years experience in the learning and development field, or as it used to be called, training. Very many moons ago, but so I suppose for me, I've spent pretty much all of my life, or my working life certainly, focused on developing the potential talent that others have in them through giving them, a strong learning foundation. I work for Indeed, and Indeed, some of your audience will know, is it's a job site. It's the #1 job site in the world. We have over 250 unique visitors to our site every month who come to us looking for either their next job opportunity or even their first job opportunity. We work in the tech sector, and we strive really to put the job seeker at the center of everything that we do. So we have a mission at Indeed. It's very simple. We help people get jobs. My role is that of the Director of Learning and Development for the Insight Sales and Client Success teams globally at Indeed. And so my team and I have the responsibility of the full learning life cycle of the Insight Sales and the Client Success reps, from their first day right through to either their next role or until they change.
Great, thank you. Somewhat jokingly, I think anybody that has may still be sending out copies of paper resumes. That's just my guess, but certainly a well-known organization, and we're very happy to have you here. So Annemarie, tell us a little bit about when you first heard kind of the slogan "Keep Learning Strong." What did that mean to you exactly?
Yeah. I think for me, and I think it's a great slogan. It's about keeping learning, I suppose, relevant. Really, that for me is really the most important thing, because when it's relevant to people and when it's relevant in their work lives and it's adding value to them, then it's much easier offering to people, and much easier to get people to take the time to invest in their own learning. So I think it's about keeping it flexible and adaptable, so that it remains relevant to those using it. It's about having effective learning that's applicable to the role of the learner. Not having something that is off the shelf and fits, several different roles. I think nowadays people are looking for much more individualistic type of content, much more curated for their learning. And I think it's about really keeping that front and center of your mind. And as a learning and development professional, it's so important to keep what we do relevant for the now. And I think that, the role of learning and development is kind of a balance between effectively managing the learning to the business needs of today on one hand, and then on the other hand, being kind of forward thinking, adapting to change, and really kind of preparing our learners for the future. And so that goes back to me for, about relevance, that what we're delivering now means something to the people who are consuming the content that we deliver. It means keeping it innovative, and because to keep learning strong, you have to be doing it on a consistent basis. I think it's important to have like a schedule for reviewing what we're delivering, so that it doesn't become stale, or it doesn't become unusable or unrelatable to the end user. So learning is never a one and done thing. It requires a commitment and investment in time and energy to keep it strong, and to me that's really, I think, a huge part of my role and that of my part of the learning and development organization.
Great, thank you for sharing that. You also reminded me as you were talking that I kind of sped very quickly over the quote that you provided us that is one of your favorites currently. Would you mind sharing that with the audience, and why that touched something within you or meant something?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a quote I heard at a conference in, I think, 2017 in Dublin. Brad Sugars was at a Pendulum Summit, it was called, and he said as part of his stage presentation, people cannot outperform their training. And I thought it was very interesting, and I want to be sure that in my role and the role that my team have within our organization, that what we do is provide support that enables each person to perform at their optimum. So it's a question I ask myself often. It's kind of a question I ask myself to keep in check. Like, are we doing enough of the right things in learning and development of our people to support their performance? Because if I can't say with absolute certainty, yes, we're doing the right things, we're giving people the right learning that they need at the right time and the right development that they need at the right time, then I'm not helping them to perform at their optimum. So for me, it really resonated. And 3 years on, I still use that to gut check, are we doing a good job, and are we honoring the commitment that we have as a learning and development group of professionals to support those that we are, I suppose, charged with supporting.
Well, thank you for sharing. I will unabashedly use that quote in the years and months to come.
Yeah.
I think very succinctly, it really helps crystallize, why training is so important to organizations. If an organization is looking to improve performance and they feel as though it's just going to be able to happen by, the old running faster, jumping higher, kind of route, I think the quote really shines a spotlight on the idea that the training has to go along with the, with the strategy to grow the organization. So thank you for that.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So how has the speed of change in your world these days? And you know, folks have asked us, well, what do you mean within COVID or outside of COVID or before COVID, or and I don't know if I would be specific. And certainly, I think COVID has changed our worlds, and so I'll just keep it simple and say, tell us a bit about how it's impacted your world.
Yeah, and you know, it's a really interesting question. I don't know that I've actually reflected on it before you asked that question. And I definitely, when I think about it, some very big shifts have occurred that have impacted learning and development, and also that have impacted how employees learn and develop, which will, I think, change how we do our roles in the future for those of us in the L&D profession. You know, and for a number of years, I suppose, the question has been asked, what would happen if what was done as a classroom training were to be moved online? And it's certainly something that I had toyed with, because we have global programs. You're talking about sometimes people leaving their families and coming in to spend time in a training, and we would have often kind of mulled over the idea of, what if it has all moved to online? What would the impact be, and what would the experience be? And guess what? Unfortunately, this has come to pass, but in a way that we never expected it to happen. It's quite literally overnight, I suppose, forced us into moving from thinking about it to actually doing it. And our learning and development teams really have had to shift how they deliver content, and because it happened so quick, we didn't have time to go and edit it. Quite literally, our facilitation teams were delivering the classroom content, but they were doing it virtually now, and literally having to think on their feet. So I think, the agility and resilience that shows is absolutely admirable. So I think, and again, how we curate content or how we develop content going forward, also, we will now always have an eye to how does this work virtually, and not just consider that everything we do pretty much be classroom dependent. We will be thinking, okay, well, what will this look like if it's done online? And I'm not talking about e-learning, I'm talking about like live deliveries. So I think the other impact for the L&D professional is that, our L&D teams, we're always quite digitally savvy, but they've had to really step up to even a greater level of competency around how they use digital tools to help them. So, they've needed to use different types of technologies to make that online delivery really strong. So like using digital whiteboards and breakout rooms, and using quizzes like Kahoot and so on, just to keep it engaging and interactive. So this is, I suppose this whole experience for everybody hasn't been probably felt the same, in the sense that some organizations were probably heavily invested in technology platforms. They probably, had a lot of their employees with, computers that they could take home in the evening time and work away pretty much uninterrupted. And we were very lucky, and indeed that's kind of the position that we were in. However, I'm very conscious that not every organization was kind of set up for that sort of a sudden change. And so it's definitely been an easier transition, and the impact has been unequal, I would say, and probably harder for some than for others. But we are L&D professionals. We're used to thinking on our feet, and I think we've had the ultimate opportunity to do that, particularly since March.
Great, thank you for that thoughtful answer. And Annemarie, can you share with us any common challenges that the last half year, I guess, or 2020 has kind of brought your way?
Yeah, I think probably the main one, and again, I don't want to sort of continue to consider the pandemic and how that has impacted, but it's just been so enormous that it has brought in and of itself challenges that we never even thought about previously. I think for us really, and I think when I talk to my L&D peers, really one of the biggest challenges was to, and because I work in a sales and CS support role, so our people are talking to customers all day, every day. The biggest challenge really was the focus of the conversation people had been used to having with customers. That had changed dramatically, very quickly, very unexpectedly, obviously. So, you know, a common challenge for those in the sales and client support type roles was how to maintain a connection with your client, how to pivot the conversation to being supportive in a different way. We talk quite a lot about being client centric and, you know, helping our customers to problem solve. So we talk a lot about solution selling and solving for problems, but you know, now that means something very different. Now it means supporting them, and it could be you know, offering insights or advice, or just like, you know, spending a little bit of time hearing about the challenges that they're now facing. And you can't, obviously, you know, you can't, some people do have a requirement for recruitment, but like a lot of our clients have been very negatively affected by this, and we want to be there for them. We don't want to disappear or ghost them in a crisis. You know, we want for them to know how much we value their business, not just when they're giving it to us, but you know, just in general. So I think one of the biggest challenges really has been that sort of shift in the conversation and how to keep the connection without being insensitive to the crisis that some of our clients are facing.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. The empathy component kind of takes on a whole different level in times such as these. I'm going to hand it over to Candice McGlann. And Candice, here you go.
Thank you, Roger. So Anne-Marie, you've shared a bit about this, but just wondering, what does successful distance learning look like for you?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting question. And I suppose it's something we're asking now more than we've ever done before. And probably because we have to rather than we might have wanted to. And I think successful distance, like when I thought about distance learning in the past, I thought about it as something you kind of did on your own. It was something that was a little bit like soulless. So if you were someone who enjoyed learning with others and enjoyed sort of a classroom experience, it was everything but that. It was sort of learning on your own, and really being very disciplined and making sure that you sat down at the appropriate times to do your learning. And now I think when I think about distance learning now, I don't think of it in that way. I actually think about it in terms of like, how can we keep the experience of learning as engaging and as strong as it would be if the experience were being had in the classroom, because all of our learning has moved online. So we've got to continue to you know, learn and develop or teach and develop people, but like now it cannot be done in the classroom. And so and I suppose really when I think about really good distance learning, it's about a blended mix of having your e-learning components and modules set up such that people can learn them in their own time, and then having scheduled sort of in-person facilitated trainings, and not just sort of teaching them what they've already learned online, but for me the human part and the part that makes distance learning really successful is the impact that a live classroom session or a live online session can have when people are like sharing their stories, when they are having an opportunity to ask questions, when reinforcement is being done, when you still have that crowdsourced sort of interaction, but obviously it's now, because people can't sit for 8 hours a day as we would have expected them to do in a classroom, they can't do that online. It's just a very, very difficult thing to do. We now have to mix up our learning to some bits being e-learning, learner driven, and others being sort of facilitated by an L&D professional who is able to sort of supplement what the e-learning would have given them. So for me, when I think about it and how I plan, or how we use it in our organization, it's about using some of the e-learning to give the basics, and then using the in-person stuff to either coach or to kind of bring them to the next level, if you like. So I think for a lot of organizations who maybe haven't planned to have a long-term digital strategy and who are now forced into it, there's a huge challenge in getting there. You have a challenge around providing content and building content that delivers really, really well online. But also I'm thinking, okay, so in 2 years' time, do we have to go and recreate all that content so that it comes back into the classroom? And what I'm talking to my teams about is, how do we make the content that we're developing and the way in which we deliver it be both I suppose be able to pivot between being done online, but also, if needs be, when we go back into the classroom, still being able to use that same content and having it delivered. So it's not changing the content hugely, but it's about being able to just shift it slightly. For obviously the online experience is quite different to the in classroom, but the content remaining, if you like, pretty much the same. So and I think, when I think about successful distance learning, thinking about like the new hire onboarding, which is one of the biggest challenges that you can have, because when you bring people into an organization, you want them to feel part of that organization. You want them to kind of feel the culture and to have a sense of who they belong, who they're part of, the environment that they're part of. That's been really, really challenging. And so I think for us in doing distant learning for new hires, it has really been about the training team, the people delivering the training, actually really just being, quite ingenious in the ways in which they just maintain engagement, in the ways in which they allow a start class to still feel like, oh, they were in my start class, to still have that acknowledgement that they belong to that cohort. But it's all done just so differently now because it is distance learning. And also I think, we do a huge amount of shadowing as part of the learning process. And I think it's really important that people get the opportunity to, what we used to call sit by Nelly, but which is really just sitting and watching somebody really good do the job. That's again another thing that's really, really difficult to do, but can be done at a distance. So, the successful distance learning is still, for me, about keeping the learner at the center of everything that you're creating and delivering, so that you're mindful of, what you put in front of them, how they're expected to learn it, how you reinforce that, and how you make them still feel part of the organization. That, in some cases, like, think of it, like since March, there have been people that have been hired into organizations who've never maybe sat physically in that office. And that's, how do you get that person to feel as connected to the business as, say, somebody who's been sitting at a desk for 5 years or something like that. So it's a huge challenge. But I think people, L&D people, I think they've found ways in which it works for them and works for their organizations.
Yes. Thanks for sharing. That's very thoughtful response with a lot of great insights that I'm sure viewers will be able to take from. Especially, I like your yes and approach to distance learning. It's not just the digital tools, but it's also what we do to build around and use those tools to equip the overall experience of the learner. So that's great. And so can you share any additional helpful advice that you have for, business leaders and L&D leaders?
Yeah, it's certainly, I suppose, again, I'm in L&D, so I always think it's one of the more critical support teams within any business. But I think, during this particular time, it's this really critical time. I think, learning and development play such an important role for the business. You know, we're stepping up to maintain a healthy and a productive workforce. And, you know, like I said earlier, people cannot outperform their level of training. So if you want productive, effective people working in your organization, then you know, as a business leader, you need to see their learning and development as something that it needs to be planned, it needs to be factored into your business plans. You know, it needs to be an investment. It is not a cost to the business. It's a cost to the business when you don't do it. It's an investment in your people, because otherwise, you know, you're not using the people that you have in your business to their full potential, which means that you're not, you know, I mean, ultimately businesses exist to drive revenue. And so, you know, you're not using your people to their full potential, and therefore you're not getting as much of a return as you could do. You know, and something I used to always say to, you know, when I was in the classroom and I was training new hires about, you know, having a business mindset, you know, I would quite often say to them that, you know, strategy is only something that's written on paper. So every business has its strategy, but technically it is only something written on paper until you put the right people in place to I suppose bring that strategy to life. And so if you bring people into your organization, like every single person that's brought into an organization, there is a role for them to play. If you bring them in and you don't see, if you expect them to grow in the role, you expect them to, you know, you increase their quotas, you know, month over month or quarter over quarter or whatever. You give them, you know, bigger targets. You give them, you know, more OKRs. You give them, you know, you make greater demands on them, and you expect them to do that without training. Then how do you as a business really expect that they can step up and do as much as they have the potential to do if you're not investing some learning and development in all of that? So strategy is great, but if you don't have the right people and you're not invested in developing them, then it really is just something that's written on paper, and it's not it cannot realize its full potential until you really think about how you grow those people, because you teach your people, the people that work for you, you teach them, they grow your business. And there is no business that exists that doesn't have growth as a really important part of its business strategy. And so if the people are driving that strategy, you need to be growing your people in their roles, growing them into future roles, and developing them in order to make sure that as a business you are, you know, extracting the maximum potential out of every single person that you have. I think that for me is really, really a critical message I would give when, we've all heard over the years, when crisis hits businesses, the first things to go are marketing and training. And I think, when a crisis hits the business, the best thing you can do is teach your people how to respond to it. Going back to what I was saying, a little bit earlier on, that, this is a crisis of great proportion, and we need to help people to be able to navigate, and we can't expect them to come up with the ways to do that. We help them to do that. And so, for me, I would say to L&D and business leaders, now is really the time that we should be investing in people to make sure that they are the best they can possibly be to see through this crisis, because like everything, this too shall pass. And we want to make sure that when we do come out the other side of it, that we're not kind of behind the curve, that we're able, ready to pick up and run really, really fast to try and make up for what we have lost.
Yes. Well said. I couldn't agree with you more. And, that's the basis behind this campaign, is to keep learning strong, because it is important for moving ahead. And so with that, what are some of the skills that you feel need to be cultivated in the workforce today? Do you think there's a difference?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because for me, for always, I think the most critical skill that anybody can have is definitely around communications. So, you know, whether you're in sales or in customer service or you're in engineering, as long as you're touching a business's customers, you know, your communication really, really matters. And I think that for certain, I suppose, in certain situations, there would be a question around whether or not the communication skills today are as strong as what they would have been in the past, because, you know, people are using technologies in ways that maybe lessen the amount of interactions they would have with humans maybe in their personal lives, and that bleeds into the skills that they have in their professional lives. So, you know, what you would practice at home with your family, you know, that small talk and that sort of, like, you know, that little chit chat is something that for me is very powerful in a professional world, because if you think about it, you know, building trust and rapport, and they're really strong components of any business. You know, your customers have to trust you. You've got to be able to interact with people internally and externally. And so I think that for me, you know, continuing to develop people's communication skills is really, really, really important. And I think more so now than ever, because going back to what Roger mentioned earlier about that empathy piece, you know, we've got to be able to articulate in a very sensitive manner the conversations that we're having with people today. And I think that for me, you know, when I started training 20 odd years ago and right through to today, I still think it is fundamentally one of the most important skills that we can continue to build in people. You know, and with communication, you're talking about not just speaking, but, you know, the ability to listen as well, and being able to listen thoughtfully. And another skill that I think that it's kind of tied to that, but I think is really, really important, is it was something that Lars actually said on his last meeting with you guys, and I thought it was really important, was like, there's so much data coming at people, so much information, so much analytics, and how do they know what to trust? And something that I do think is really, really important in today's world is helping, I suppose, to decipher, like giving people the story of that data. Yeah. So some people enjoy consuming data, but quite a lot of people, they don't. And what they want is they want somebody to be able to give them data that tells a story. So when you, and again, in my world, I'm talking about sales, I'm talking about client success, but I'm sure it would apply in most situations. You know, we have a lot of information about our organizations, about our products, about, you know, the numbers and so on and so forth, the impact that we can have in your business. And giving numbers to people is really a bit of a soul destroying experience for some of the receivers. And I think being able to tell a really, really compelling story, being able to take that data and turn it into a story that is meaningful for the individual. So that whole thing of, you know, being able to analyze, but then tell the story that helps the person to understand it and resonate with them and make sense in their day to day, I think is really, again, an important skill. So probably, you know, different to maybe what other contributors would say, but I do think that, you know, good old communication, you know, people buy from people they trust. You cannot have a good relationship where there isn't good communication. And everything that we do in learning and development, and as I say, in sales and client success, anything where you're dealing with humans, communication is for me the number one.
Yes, absolutely. And so what new insights and wisdom have you gained from this year so far?
Yeah, I don't know about the wisdom, but definitely the insights, I suppose. The importance of, again, as learning and development professionals, being very agile, being very resilient. And I talked a little bit about that earlier, the resilience that, you know, our teams showed when they quite literally overnight went from delivering content in the classroom to using that same content and being able to deliver it online, and, you know, maintain the energy that they needed to maintain to do that. You know, and everybody was going through their own mini crisis, and still you have to show up and you have to, you know, put on a good show. You've got to be able to give a really good learning experience to that particular group that you're working with. So I think for me, it's just the almost like the agility that people showed and the resilience. And I think also, I suppose one of the other lessons I've learned is, we can't afford to be too precious about the content we're building, or, the curriculums that we've curated, because who knows how quickly all of that can turn on its head. And so, for me, the biggest takeaway is really just to make sure that we, again, going back to what I said earlier, we keep our learner front and center of everything we do. We might have spent like months and months working on something, and all of a sudden that's changed hugely because of circumstances outside of our control. And I think that for me is one of the biggest insights coming out of this year.
Great. And just for final words, how do you plan to keep learning strong?
Yeah, I have another saying. I live my life by sayings, but I do have one that I quote, I would say almost definitely on a weekly, if not on a more regular basis, and that is that every day is a school day. So I think that, whether you're a learning and development professional or you're in a role that, you're constantly having to learn in, it's not something that you do ad hoc. I think it's something that really needs to be ingrained into kind of how you perform your duties and how you make up the time in your day. So for me, it's about making sure that I'm reading, that I'm using our own internal learning platforms to do my own learning journey. I think it's, constantly striving to keep what we do relevant. And so that's about being aware of what do our teams need from us, and making sure that we're not sort of in a cloud, thinking that, we know what's best for the org, when in fact, we need to keep our feet very firmly planted on the ground and make the training relevant for them so that it's something that they want to utilize. And so it's two elements. It's what I do for myself, what I encourage my teams to do for themselves, but also how we think about how we keep learning strong for the teams that we support.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's been a big theme throughout this conversation from you, is that learning centered, on the learners. So
yeah,
thank you so much for your time. And I know, Roger and I are big sayings people too, and we love quotes. So it's been a pleasure having you.
You're my kindred spirits. So.
Yeah. And so, Annemarie, if you don't mind just sharing how people can connect with you if they want to learn more about you.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. So Annemarie McAuley, you can find me. I don't think there are too many of us on LinkedIn, so it should be relatively easy to find me. I don't do a huge amount of social media, I have to be very honest with you. I'm quite shy on stuff like that. Yeah, so I'm very happy for anybody to connect with me on LinkedIn. I am one of the biggest things I believe as learning and development professionals that we need to do is we don't own any of the things that we learn. We should take it in, but give it out tenfold. And so I am a big proponent of shared learning and helping others so that they themselves can learn. And I think you get out of these things what you get back what you give out. So I'm always very, very happy to chat or to share insights or to share what I know with anybody who asks. And I think that's kind of one of the best things about working at in the organization I work in, is that we're very much encouraged to have that mentality of shared learning, that it's I think it's one of Ray Dalio's principles. It's 1 + 1 = 3. So when you have one person sharing with one person, it's to the power of 3 rather than it being to the power of 2. So I think it's really very, very powerful.
Wonderful. Roger, any last thoughts?
I don't think so. I found today's interview with you, Annemarie, to be very insightful, and really glad we had this opportunity, and we thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes. And just for our viewers out there, if you want to join the conversation, we encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and also you can go to innovationsolutions.com/keeplearningstrong to see more interviews like this one from other thought leaders, and share your story, just like Annemarie has shared. 1 + 1 = 3. And the more that we share, the more that we come together, the stronger we'll be as a learning and development community. So we'd love to hear from you. You can share what you're doing in your organization at #KeepLearningStrong. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you.